You mentioned one-child policy, so can we speak a little bit more to that? Like, what impact has it had on the Chinese society? On culture, you already mentioned some of it, some of the impact on the economics, on the culture, on the demographics of China.
It's probably one of the most radical policies that China has enacted in its history. And the enforcement was very strict. In my class, nobody had a sibling except my friend who was a Uyghur. 98% of urban households had only one child. The other 2% are twins, which you're allowed to keep, thank goodness, if you had the good fortune of giving birth to twins. It had lots of unintended consequences on the economy and society as well. Maybe on the good side, it's actually a golden age for Chinese women because the Chinese girls never had as much education investment apportioned to them as they've had after being the only child in the family. And you raised a daughter like a son. And if we look at all the skill gaps and the education gaps and the returns to education, actually, girls fared better. Apart from the top leadership in the Chinese political class, you look at the CEOs of major companies, in the ministries, civil servants, there are a lot of Chinese women. And actually, recently, if you look at the surveys, the Chinese families would prefer to have a daughter than a son because they've seen how much bargaining power you as a Chinese woman and as a rare bride or a scarce supply of brides goes, you have raised your bargaining power and you can command high amounts of dowry. That was an unintended good thing about the one-child policy. And to the opposite, the recent relaxation of the one-child policy, actually, women are now encouraged to have as many kids as they possibly can. The flip side of the one-child policy has not necessarily been good to women in the job market because they think, oh, well, you've only had one child. Oh, guess what? You can have another child. So that's not necessarily good for long-term employability. But on the economic side, I've written about this in my academic papers. It's been one of the very important causes of high saving rate. I always tell people, you want to stimulate consumption, well, have more kids. You know how much one of those costs, right?
Yeah.
Especially in China,
Yeah.
the tutorialships, the education. You have to buy a house. You have to buy a house for them so that they can
Yeah.
get married eventually.
Yep.
So it's very, very expensive to have a child. If you have more children, you spend more. But maybe people don't want to have more children because the cost of having a child is so high. And this is driven by the competition. And why is there so much competition? Because there's a one-child policy generation, right? You want your child to be the dragon or the phoenix, and you put everything into that one child. That makes the child more anxious, makes the whole environment more competitive. And in the end, these one-child policy children don't want to have a lot of kids because they don't want them to see them suffer what they have suffered, right? So there are all these kind of unexpected consequences, but also changing the social fabric. I'd like to say that it broke the hierarchy of the family where the parents had the dominant role. Now the kids are the boss. They boss everybody around. They boss their grandparents around.
Yeah.
It relates to the puzzle, the housing puzzle. How is it possible that the Chinese youth can afford these really expensive real estate with their meager income? Well, one common saying is that they have 6 wallets, right? You and your spouse, together with the parents, and maybe even the grandparents would chip in. So there's this kind of intergenerational family dynamics that makes our models focused on the individual consumption just completely inappropriate to describe these dynamics. But the demographic side is the other challenge, which is they were so strict about the one-child policy and they kept it in for too long. So that once they decide to loosen it and decided that fertility rates were way too low to sustain the Chinese economy and its future, it was already too late. And now they're kind of finding all kinds of creative ways to make people have more kids. This is not something that they can demand and command in ways that they can demand and command emerging strategic sectors, right? So all these really interesting social anecdotes where they're encouraging even single women in a highly conservative society, encouraging single women to raise children. Nothing to be afraid about that. Lots of support system going there. I mean, they're radically changing the whole, thinking around these kind of issues.
Well, it seems like even the West, a lot of the developed countries have a demographics problem. Seems like a lot of countries not have enough babies.
South Korea,
South Korea?
very, very, very low fertility rate. It's just that for China's stage of development, it should be having more babies than it is currently having. So the one-child policy accelerated that demographic transition, right? It really squeezed in many, many decades into two. But my view about the demographic aspects for the economy is not as pessimistic as most people, because meanwhile we're talking about aging, there are also high rates of unemployment, right? When we're talking about is there enough people to do the jobs, we have things like AI and not enough jobs and these kind of questions that are first order. We haven't even figured out the relationship between labor force, productivity, what are the factors of production that will be most important for future economy. And so we shouldn't be terrified that there's a looming aging problem, because I think the more important question is that skill gap, right? What kind of skills do we actually need in the economy? What kind of education system should we design in the economy to better suit the country to an ever-evolving and transformative technological society?
Because if that's successful, then we'd be able to respond to whatever puzzle the demographic situation creates.
Yeah. If you look at the most recent evidence on this issue, they found that post-1990, aging economies became richer. Not the other way around, which was true for the pre-1990 sample. And the reason is that these aging societies much more rapidly adopted new technologies, automation, that actually helped the entire economy. So should we be panicking about this now when we're actually also panicking about the fact there are not enough jobs around? There are other issues that are more relevant for the Chinese economy today.